Picture the greatest warriors alive, a sword saint, an archmage, a divine archer, a literal human tank, all getting completely, utterly destroyed by one world-ending monster. And the only person left standing is the guy nobody even remembered, the lowest-ranked soldier, the absolute nobody. And somehow, that nobody is our main character. So here is where we drop straight into the action before we even explain anything. Because that is exactly how this story grabs you by the collar and refuses to let go from the very beginning. Our boy Gray is standing in the middle of his home village, and there is a guy named Belder, big, cocky, the kind of guy who has been throwing his weight around this village for years. And Belder is surrounded by 4 of his little crew, all of them looking at Gray like he is nothing, like he has always been nothing, like he will always be nothing. And here is the thing you have to understand before the punching starts. In another timeline, in a future that Gray watched burn to the ground, Belder was just a bad memory from a weak version of himself that he never got to fix. But Gray is not that version of himself anymore. Gray has lived through 15 years of war, loss, and absolute devastation. And the man standing in that village square is not the fragile kid Belder remembers pushing around. The transformation has already happened inside. Now it just needs one moment to show itself on the outside. Belder throws the first move, and our boy does not even flinch. Not a single step back, not a single moment of hesitation, just one clean counter, smooth as breathing. And suddenly all 4 of Belder's guys are on the ground before they even fully processed what happened to them. And Belder himself? Standing there shaking, genuinely trembling, looking at Gray like he just saw a ghost wearing a kid's face. Because this was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be a normal Tuesday of picking on the village nobody. And instead, he is staring at 4 of his friends laid out flat without this guy even breaking a sweat. Gray even pulls out a leaf, just a regular leaf, and slices it perfectly clean in half with one flick of his sword, not to show off, but to make a point, to let Belder know exactly what level of person he just decided to mess with today. Belder screams something about needing to leave very urgently, turns around, and absolutely sprints out of there. Peak comedy. Genuinely one of the most satisfying openings you will ever watch, because every single person watching knows exactly what that moment felt like, and it lands perfectly every single time. But okay, now that we have seen what our boy can do, let us actually pull back and explain how we got here, because the context behind this moment is what makes everything hit 10 times harder. In the future, 15 years from now, the world is essentially ending, and the people standing between humanity and total destruction are the 4 most powerful warriors alive. We are talking about a sword saint who could split mountains, an archmage whose magic rewrote the laws of reality, a divine archer who never missed a single target in his life, and a warrior so physically durable that people genuinely questioned whether he was even human at all. For legends, for absolute monsters of their craft, and all 4 of them, together, fighting at the peak of their power, got absolutely wiped out by a single entity called the Liquidator, a world-destroying force so overwhelming that none of their combined power could even scratch it. Gray watched every single one of them fall. He watched each of them go down one by one, and he could do nothing because he was just the lowest-ranked soldier in the entire army, the name on a list that nobody bothered to memorize, the guy who survived not because he was strong enough, but because fate apparently had different plans for him. And that is when Kronos showed up, a mysterious power, ancient and strange and completely unexplained, that looked at Gray in the middle of that apocalyptic moment and essentially said, "Hey bro, there is something in you that nobody has found yet, something worth sending back for, so go figure it out." And just like that, with zero warning and even less explanation, Gray got launched 15 years into the past, landing back in the world as a kid again, but with every memory, every skill, and every hard lesson he earned in that lifetime of war fully intact inside him. Oh, and he also came back with a black sword wrapped in red lightning that carries a power so dangerous it literally drains his life force every time he uses it. Classic second chance setup, except this time Gray actually has to earn every single step forward, because his body right now is a teenager's body, fragile and limited, and the gap between what his mind knows and what his body can currently handle is honestly terrifying. So after the Belder situation gets handled, beautifully, efficiently, with maximum impact and minimum effort, Gray uses that whole encounter strategically, because our boy is not just strong, he is smart. And in this timeline, he knows exactly what doors he needs to open and exactly which opportunities he needs to create. He uses Beldur's humiliating defeat as leverage to get himself a recommendation to the Shinryu Dojo, which is the first major stepping stone toward his real goal, the World Union Academy, the most prestigious warrior training institution on the entire planet. The instructor at Shinryu is a woman named Sarah, and Gray needs her to write him a letter of recommendation after a sparring session, which sounds simple enough until Sarah actually gets in the ring with him and starts to realize that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with her read of this situation. She thought she was testing a kid. She is realizing she is standing across from something that her instincts cannot categorize, something that makes every alarm in her body go off simultaneously, even though nothing about his appearance or his age should be triggering any of this. She agrees to write the letter, hands shaking slightly, trying to figure out why she is scared of a child, because her instincts are screaming at a volume she has never experienced before. And then something unexpected happens, something Gray did not plan for, something that hits him right in the part of his chest where all the things he lost in his first lifetime live. He finds out that in his original timeline, Sarah died alone, fighting an ogre nest, with nobody coming to help her in time. She died alone in a forest fighting monsters that she had no business fighting without backup, and nobody even got there in time to matter. Gray came back to stop the apocalypse, yes, but now he is standing here looking at the person who trained him, the person who helped shape him into the warrior he eventually became, and she is walking toward her death with absolute confidence that she can handle it solo. Poor guy genuinely cannot catch a break. He has been back in the past for 5 minutes, and he is already adding people to the list of things he refuses to let die this time around. So what does Gray do? He threatens to knock her unconscious with her own sword if she tries to go alone. He says it completely straight-faced, with the kind of calm certainty that makes it very clear this is not a bluff, and Sarah looks at him for a long moment and somehow understands, on some level she cannot explain, that he means every single word. The two of them go into the forest together. What they walk into is not just an ogre nest. It is an ogre nest led by an ogre general, a boss-tier intelligent monster that actively buffs every ogre around it and coordinates their attacks with terrifying strategic awareness. This is not a standard mission. This is a catastrophe waiting to happen. The fight starts brutal and immediately gets worse. Swords breaking, bodies getting slammed, Gray getting grabbed by something 3 times his size and absolutely pounded into the ground. And just when it looks like they have pushed as hard as 2 people can push, and it is not going to be enough, Gray's last blade shatters in his hand. And in that moment of total physical exhaustion, with nothing left to fight with and his body screaming at him from every direction, he reaches for it. The Black Sword power. The Chronos gift. The thing that makes him something other than human for a few terrifying seconds. Shadows wrap around him like a second skin. The red lightning crackles through the darkness. And in one single devastating slash he obliterates the entire nest. The ogres, the general, every single thing in that forest that had been trying to kill them. All of it gone in one moment. And then Gray collapses. Because of course he does. His body absolutely cannot handle his own strength yet, and he is going to have to earn the right to use that power without destroying himself in the process. But Sarah is alive, and that, right now, is enough. Gray wakes up 5 days later, and the first thing he registers is that he is lying in the softest bed he has probably ever been in, which is genuinely disorienting for a guy who spent 15 years sleeping on battlefield ground and waking up to the sound of monsters trying to eat him. The second thing he registers is that his entire body feels like it got put through a rock grinder and then reassembled slightly wrong, which is accurate, because that is essentially what happened to him inside that ogre nest. The third thing he registers, and this one takes a moment to fully process, is that outside the window of wherever he is recovering, the entire village is apparently celebrating him like he just personally saved the world, which, to be fair, is not entirely inaccurate as a long-term description of what he is trying to do, but right now feels extremely premature and also extremely loud for someone dealing with a post-power overload headache. The village pulled together and bought him a proper magic healing potion, not a cheap one, a real one, the kind that actually accelerates recovery instead of just dulling pain. And the fact that an entire community spent their collective coin on him. This guy who left as a nobody and came back as something unclassifiable hits Gray somewhere deep and quiet in a way he does not entirely know how to process. But our boy does not have time to sit in feelings, because the Academy entrance exam has a date on it, and that date does not move for anyone regardless of how many ogre generals they just obliterated in a forest. So Gray gets on the best horse in the village, the actual best one, because the whole town voted on giving it to him, which is the kind of send-off that would make a lesser person emotional, and rides out while literally the entire village lines the road holding signs and cheering like they are watching their champion leave for the biggest fight of his life. Which, in a way, they are. They just do not know the full scale of what that actually means yet. Sarah watches him go, and there is something in her expression that sits between pride and unease. The look of someone who trained a student and gradually realized somewhere in those 9 months that the student was not learning from her so much as he was patiently allowing her to help him unlock something that was already inside him the entire time. It is a complicated look. Gray rides out without looking back, because if he looks back right now, he is going to feel things, and he does not have the schedule space for feelings at the moment. Here is the part nobody talks about enough. The entrance exam for the World Union Academy is not a written test. It is not a theory evaluation. It is not a formal demonstration of controlled technique in a safe environment. It is a fight. A real fight against a trained examiner who is actively trying to assess your ceiling by pushing you toward it. And if you do not show something worth writing down, you go home. Simple, brutal, efficient. And Gray shows up to this exam with a shattered right arm that barely functions. Because 5 days of magical recovery is good, but it is not miracle-level good. And his dominant hand is essentially operating at maybe 30% of normal capacity. Any reasonable person in this situation would defer, would explain the injury, would ask to be rescheduled. But Gray is not here to be reasonable, and he is not here to wait, because every day he spends not inside that academy is a day the people pulling the strings on the liquidator's summoning are operating without anyone in position to stop them. So our boy walks into that exam hall, one arm basically hanging on vibes and willpower, and proceeds to fight the examiner one-handed in a way that leaves the entire room holding their breath. The fight is genuinely something else to witness. Gray reading every movement before it happens, countering with efficiency that makes the examiner quietly recalibrate everything they thought they knew about what a first-year candidate could look like. One arm tucked and useless while the other does work that should require two. He nearly pulls off the full upset. He comes within an inch of it, but the clock runs out before the decisive moment lands, and the result is officially logged as a draw. And a draw, as far as the Academy's admission system is concerned, is not a pass. Gray steps off that floor genuinely believing he failed, which is a strange thing to watch because this is a guy who has faced down the end of the world and did not break. And right now he is standing in an exam hall quietly processing the possibility that he did all of this and still did not get in. The dejection is real. The exhaustion is real. For one brief moment, he looks exactly like the kid his body currently is, and it is quietly devastating. Then the divine eye activates. Now, the divine eye is not something the Academy controls. It is an ancient recognition system built into the admission process, a measure that bypasses the official scoring entirely and activates on its own when it detects something in a candidate that the standard exam cannot quantify or contain. It is rare. It is unpredictable. And when it fires for Gray, his application literally lights up in blue flames right there in front of every examiner in the room, burning bright and clean in a way that makes everyone in that hall go completely silent for a solid few seconds before the chaos starts. The examiners are staring at each other like they need to confirm with a second set of eyes that they all just saw the same thing. Because this does not happen. This almost never happens. And when it does happen, it means something significant in a way none of them can fully explain in technical language. Gray is in, not because he passed the standard test, but because the Academy's own ancient recognition system looked at him and said yes before anyone else got a vote on it. Yep, you heard that right. Our boy got in by setting his application on fire. Absolute legend behavior. Now, getting into the World Union Academy is the goal, but staying inside it and actually doing what he came to do is a completely different challenge, and Gray figures this out approximately within the first week of being there. The Academy is enormous, politically complex, socially stratified, and quietly dangerous in ways that a normal first-year student would never even detect beneath the surface. But Gray is not a normal first-year student. He is a man with 15 years of battlefield experience packed inside a teenager's body, and his eyes see layers of this institution that none of his classmates are even aware exist yet. His first class in the magic department starts like any standard evaluation session, the professor walking through foundational ether manipulation while the students demonstrate basic output. And then Gray does his technique, the one from the future, super compressed ether packed into a density that the current era's curriculum has not even theorized yet. And the entire room goes very, very quiet in a way that is distinctly different from the normal classroom quiet. The professor stares. The students stare. Gray sits there looking completely unbothered, because from where he is standing this is just the basic stuff. This is the warm-up level. This is what he considers foundational. And the gap between his baseline and everyone else's ceiling is already becoming visible and already drawing attention from the exact kinds of people he did not want drawing attention to him this early. But there is one moment in that first stretch of academy life that cuts through all the tactical calculation and the strategic positioning and the careful management of how much he reveals and when. And it is the moment he realizes that a classmate named Bella Albright is heading towards something that will genuinely destroy her if nobody steps in. She is cheerful. She is bright. She is completely unaware of what is being planned for her in the background of this institution that is supposed to be protecting her. And Gray, who came back in time to stop an apocalypse, who has a world-ending entity on his to-do list and a criminal organization already sniffing around his edges, Gray steps in for Bella anyway. Because he is built like that. He cannot see someone walking toward a cliff and just take notes. And the moment he steps in, he pulls on a thread that is connected to something much, much larger than one classmate's safety, something that runs deep into the walls of the academy itself. And somewhere in those walls, someone very dangerous just noticed that he pulled it. Let us talk about Professor Bradley, because this man is the kind of villain that makes your skin crawl not because he is loud or theatrical about it, but because he is quiet. He is institutional. He is the type of evil that wears a respectable title and a faculty badge and sits in a position of trust specifically so that nobody looks too hard at what he is actually doing underneath all of it. Bradley is not just a bad professor with questionable teaching methods. He is running a full illegal operation inside the walls of the most prestigious academy on the planet, conducting human experiments on students, pushing their bodies past sustainable limits with dark techniques and forbidden enhancements, and doing all of it in service of something that Gray recognizes immediately and viscerally because he watched it destroy the entire world once before. Bradley is working toward the Liquidator's summoning. This man, standing in a classroom with a grade book in his hand and chalk dust on his sleeves, is one of the threads in the conspiracy that ends with every great warrior on the planet getting obliterated and the world burning to nothing. And Gray figured this out before most of the Academy's own security apparatus even got close to suspecting it, because Gray has seen the end result of this man's work with his own eyes, and he is not going to sit quietly in a desk and wait for due process to handle it. The Bella situation is what pulls the first thread loose, because when Gray steps in to stop what is being planned for her, he is not just helping a classmate avoid something painful. He is interrupting a process that Bradley has carefully constructed over a long period of time, a pipeline that runs from seemingly routine academy evaluations down into illegal surgical modification that nobody above ground is supposed to know about. Gray gets close enough to see what is actually happening, close enough to understand the architecture of it, and the moment he does, the equation becomes very simple in his mind, even if the execution is going to be anything but. He exposes Bradley. Not carefully, not through channels, not with a politely worded formal complaint submitted to the appropriate academic committee. He exposes him directly, aggressively, in a way that removes every layer of institutional cover Bradley has spent years carefully building around himself. And the fallout from that exposure is immediate and messy and dangerous in multiple directions at once, because Bradley does not operate alone, and the people connected to him inside and outside the academy are not the type to accept exposure quietly and wait for a tribunal to sort things out. But before the full weight of that fallout lands, there is another fight that Gray has to get through first, and this one is deeply personal in a way that the Bradley confrontation is not, because this fight is not against a corrupt professor. It is against a second-year student who has had dark magic pumped directly into his body without his full understanding or consent. A kid who is being used as a weapon by the exact same network Bradley is connected to. A kid who is currently brainwashed. To the point where the person standing in front of Gray during their confrontation is barely recognizable as the student who walked into this academy with normal ambitions and a normal future ahead of him. Our boy has to fight someone who is also, in a very real sense, a victim, and he has to fight him hard enough to win without destroying him, which is a genuinely complicated needle to thread when the person you are fighting has dark magic screaming through every cell in his body and is coming at you with zero hesitation and zero self-preservation instinct. This is one of those fights where winning is the easy part, and how you win is the whole test. Gray wins. Of course he wins. But the way he wins matters, because he manages to neutralize the dark magic influence without ending the kid, which takes a level of precision and control that someone who only had a teenager's worth of experience could not have managed. It takes someone who has spent 15 years in real warfare learning the exact difference between force that ends things and force that redirects them. After it is over, the brainwashed student collapses, the dark magic dissipates, and the people who were watching this whole situation very closely, including the Academy administration, who were considering abolishing the entire Divine Eye program because of the chaos surrounding Gray's enrollment, are left staring at an outcome they did not fully expect and cannot entirely explain away. The Divine Eye program stays. Gray made sure of that with his own body, and the administration knows it even if they are not comfortable saying it out loud. Here is the thing about the Bloodrinkers that you need to understand before they become a major presence in this story. They are not a random criminal organization that happened to notice Gray because he was making noise. They are a structured, resourced, deeply embedded criminal network with specific interests in the Liquidator Summoning Project. And they have people inside the Academy, people outside the Academy, people in positions of authority, and people in positions of anonymity. And they have been watching the Bradley situation unfold with the kind of focused attention that tells you they had invested interests in that operation that go far beyond one corrupt professor. When Gray blows Bradley's cover, he does not just remove a piece from their board. He announces himself as a problem. He draws a line connecting himself to their operation that they cannot ignore, and the Bloodrinkers respond the way organized criminal networks with unlimited resources respond to problems, which is by making the problem a target and assigning resources to the removal of that target immediately and without sentiment. Our boy now has a bounty on his head from people who are significantly better organized and significantly more dangerous than a village bully or a nest of ogres. And he is still technically a first-year student who has not even finished his first academic term. And then there is the deeper revelation, the one that hits harder than the Bradley exposure, harder than the Bloodrinker bounty, harder than any of the individual threats stacking up around him. Gray starts pulling on enough threads inside the Academy to reach a conclusion that reframes everything he thought he understood about this institution and his reason for being inside it. The Academy itself, not just a corrupt professor, not just an infiltrated program, but the structure of the institution at levels above what most faculty even have clearance to see, may be actively connected to the Liquidator's summoning. The place that is supposed to be training the world's greatest warriors to protect humanity is potentially being used, at some organizational level, as a mechanism to ensure humanity's destruction. And Gray is standing in the middle of it, first-year badge on his chest, body still recovering from the last 3 catastrophic fights, arm that keeps threatening to give out on him at critical moments. And now he knows that the enemy is not just outside the walls. The enemy might be the walls. To understand what this does to Gray psychologically, you have to remember that in his original timeline, he spent 15 years fighting for humanity and watched the world's greatest institutions fail to stop the Liquidator anyway. And he has always carried a quiet version of the question of whether the failure was truly unforeseen or whether something more deliberate was happening underneath it all. And now he is getting his answer. And the answer is exactly as bad as the darkest version of that question implied. He does not break. Gray does not break, because breaking is not something his particular brand of person does, but he recalibrates, hard and fast, because the mission just got significantly more complicated than get into the academy and train. The mission is now get into the academy, train, avoid assassination, expose a conspiracy that runs through the institution itself, and do all of this while a criminal organization with unlimited resources has marked him for elimination. Our boy stares at the training grounds late one night after processing all of this, and the look on his face is not fear. It is not even anger. It is the specific expression of someone who has already decided, who finished deciding somewhere around the moment the world ended and Kronos sent him back, and who is now just doing the math on how many problems need to be handled and in what order. And somewhere in the Academy's deepest shadows, the people behind all of this are watching that expression on his face. And for the first time, some of them are quietly, genuinely afraid. Here is where things stop being complicated and start being genuinely dangerous in a way that goes beyond political conspiracy and criminal organizations watching from the shadows. Here is where the threats stop being abstract and start being people with weapons standing in Gray's immediate physical space, trying to end him before he becomes any more of a problem than he already is. The first assassination attempt does not come as a grand confrontation. It does not come with a speech or a monologue or any of the dramatic framing that would at least give you a moment to prepare. It comes in camp, in the middle of what is supposed to be a supervised field exercise, in the dark, quietly, professionally, in a way that tells Gray immediately that whoever sent these people is not experimenting with the idea of removing him, but has made a firm operational decision and allocated serious resources to executing it. These are not amateurs. These are not desperate low-level bloodrinker foot soldiers trying to earn credit. These are trained, specialized, equipped, and patient, which is the worst possible combination when your target is a 15-year-old in a field camp with limited access to his full capability. Gray handles it. He handles it the way he handles everything. Not cleanly, not without cost, not with the effortless efficiency that would make for a satisfying action sequence, but with the grinding, determined competence of someone who has survived worse and refuses to treat survival as something that requires ideal conditions. The assassins expected a first-year student. They got 15 years of compressed battlefield experience in a teenager's body, and the gap between those two things is the gap between a successful mission and a failed one. But what bothers Gray after the camp attack is not the fight itself. It is the fact that it happened inside a supervised academy exercise at all, which means either the bloodrinkers have reached long enough to operate inside official academy events without triggering security responses, or the people running security for that exercise were complicit, or both. Neither option is comfortable. Both options point toward the same conclusion he already reached about the academy's institutional compromise, and every new data point just reinforces it with increasing clarity. The field march is where the next wave hits. And this one is worse because it comes from inside the official structure. A professor, a person in a position of educational authority participating in a coordinated march with students under their supervision, who at a specific pre-planned moment attempts to use that position and that proximity to do something that would compromise multiple students and create a catastrophe that could be explained away as an accident in the incident report. Traitorous professors are in some ways more terrifying than external assassins because they require you to hold two completely incompatible ideas in your head simultaneously. This person is in a role designed to protect students, and this person is actively trying to destroy them. And the cognitive dissonance of that combination creates hesitation in most people that gets exploited. Gray does not hesitate, because Gray has already updated his model of this institution to account for the fact that titles and roles inside it do not automatically indicate alignment or safety. He sees the move coming before it executes, responds before the damage can propagate, and neutralizes it in a way that looks, to the untrained eye, like a student with unusual reflexes reacting to an unusual accident, which is exactly the level of visibility Gray wants to maintain for as long as he possibly can. Then the water lizards. And honestly, of all the things trying to kill our boy at this point in the story, the bloodrinkers, the traitorous faculty, the ancient conspiracy running through the academy's foundations, the water lizards in the rain during a completely routine outdoor training segment feel almost insultingly mundane, except they are also coordinated, which means they are not random wildlife. They are directed, which means someone in this institution has the ability to weaponize local fauna against specific targets, which means the level of operational integration between the people pulling strings and the physical environment of the academy is even deeper than Gray had mapped. He fights them in the pouring rain. Visibility basically zero, footing unreliable, with the kind of accumulated physical fatigue that comes from being in near constant danger for weeks without adequate recovery time. And he gets through it. But getting through it is not the same as being fine. And the distance between those two things is growing smaller every time something new comes at him before his body has fully processed the last thing. Now, the arm. We need to talk about the arm, because this is the moment that reframes everything about what Gray is dealing with at the physical level and what his relationship with his own power actually costs him to maintain. During training, not during a fight, not during an assassination attempt, not during a crisis, but during a deliberate, intentional training session where Gray is specifically testing the upper limits of what his body can handle when he pushes his power past its natural ceiling, his arm gets torn off. Not metaphorically, not a figure of speech for how badly it hurts. Physically, catastrophically, completely removed from his body by the force of his own power exceeding the structural capacity of the vessel trying to contain it. It happens without warning, which is exactly how the story delivers it. No lead-up, no slow dramatic build-up, just the moment and then the aftermath. And the narrator is as shocked as Gray is, even though Gray recovers from the shock faster, because he has been through enough that his brain has developed a very efficient emergency response system for categorically terrible things happening to his body. The arm is gone. And then, in a beat that takes a moment to fully register, it grows back. Not slowly, not partially, not with a healing potion or a medical intervention. It regenerates, fully and completely. The Chronos power doing something at the biological level that should not be physiologically possible, but apparently is when you are carrying a gift from an ancient time manipulation entity in your bloodstream. The arm is back. Gray looks at it for a moment, and then he goes again. This is the part that genuinely breaks people's brains when they first encounter it, because most stories treat catastrophic physical injury as a narrative stopping point, a moment of enforced recovery and reflection, a beat where the character has to sit with the consequences before moving forward. And Gray just does not operate that way, not because he is reckless, but because he has done the math and determined that the time he would spend recovering is time the conspiracy inside this academy is using to advance toward an outcome that costs the entire world, and his personal comfort does not factor into that equation at all. So he asks Professor Ariel, who is watching all of this happen with the expression of someone who went into education with a specific set of expectations about what teaching would look like, and is now confronting the complete destruction of every single one of those expectations. He asks her to sever his arm every time his power spirals out of control during training sessions, as a method of forcing his body to repeatedly regenerate under pressure, building tolerance through repetition, turning the catastrophic failure point into a training mechanism. Professor Ariel stares at him for a long moment that contains approximately 15 different emotional responses cycling through in rapid succession, and then she has absolutely no words. The narrator has no words. Honestly, nobody has words. This is negotiation tactics from a 15-year-old, ladies and gentlemen, and the 15-year-old is completely serious. The demon sword comes into the picture here as the sharpest edge of all of this, because the black sword wrapped in red lightning that Chronos sent back with Gray is not just powerful, it actively drains his life force every time he uses it at full capacity. Which means every session where he pushes past his limits and reaches for that power is a session where he is trading pieces of his own lifespan for the ability to fight at a level that can actually threaten the liquidator. He knows this. He has known it the whole time. And he goes to the training grounds alone in the deep hours before dawn, when the rest of the academy is asleep, and he trains with it anyway, smashing pillars, losing his arm, getting it grown back, losing it again, going again. Because the world ends in 15 years if he is not ready, and being ready costs something, and he has already decided what he is willing to pay. The training grounds are empty except for him and the red lightning and the sound of stone breaking. And in the shadows of the academy, watching him in the dark, the people behind the liquidator's summoning are beginning to understand that they did not just acquire a problem. They acquired something they have never encountered before, something their models did not account for. And the question of what to do about Gray is becoming more urgent with every pillar he reduces to rubble in the dark. There is a version of this story where Gray, having survived the assassination attempts, having exposed Bradley, having protected Bella, having won the fight against the brainwashed second year, having endured the arm and the demon's sword and the water lizards and the traitorous professor and the blood drinker bounty. There is a version where all of that accumulates into a moment of earned stillness, a breath, a beat where the story acknowledges what our boy has been through and lets him stand in it for a second before the next wave comes. That version of this story does not exist. What exists instead is Gray standing at the edge of everything he has built in this timeline so far, looking at the landscape of threats around him with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who has learned that stillness in this particular war is not rest. It is just the interval between incoming damage, and using it wisely is its own kind of skill. What Gray has built in this timeline, piece by piece and fight by fight, is significant even if none of it feels finished yet. He has a place inside the World Union Academy, not just an enrollment, but a position, a reputation that moves ahead of him through the hallways now in ways that are complicated and layered and not entirely safe, but are undeniably real. He is the first year who activated the Divine Eye. He is the student who exposed Bradley. He is the kid who fought a brainwashed second year with dark magic in his veins and walked away intact while saving the Divine Eye program from being shut down entirely. He is the person that Professor Ariel looks at with an expression that cycles between deep professional concern and something that sits closer to awe, trying to reconcile the student in front of her with everything she has witnessed him do and survive and choose. The Academy knows his name now in a way it did not when he walked through the gate with a shattered arm and a leaf-slicing demonstration in his recent history. The problem is that not all of the people who know his name are people who want him to succeed. The blood drinkers do not give up. This is the thing that someone who has only faced uncomplicated enemies might not fully appreciate about an organization with their structure and resources. They do not experience a failed assassination attempt as a reason to reconsider the contract. They experience it as a data point that updates their approach and informs the next operation. Every time they send something at Gray and he handles it, they learn something about what he can do and they calibrate accordingly, which means the gap between what they send and what he can manage is not widening as he gets stronger. It is narrowing, because they are learning in real time while he is simultaneously burning through his own life force to keep pace with the escalation. It is a race, and the finish line is not a fight. The finish line is Gray reaching a level of mastery where the cost of using his full power stops being his own lifespan, and he is not there yet. He is closer than he was when he woke up in the village 5 days after the ogre nest, but closer, and there are two very different places to stand. The Academy conspiracy is the weight underneath all of it, the thing that does not resolve in dramatic fashion because it cannot, because institutional corruption at the scale Gray is beginning to map does not get dismantled in a single confrontation or a single exposure. It gets dismantled layer by layer over time. And the people at the center of it are patient in a way that individual villains rarely are. They are not panicking at Bradley's exposure. They are reorganizing around it. They are treating Gray's presence not as an emergency, but as a long-term variable that needs to be managed, which is actually more terrifying than panic would be because it means they believe they have time on their side, which means they know something about the Liquidator's summoning timeline that Gray needs to factor into his own calculations. The clock he is working against may not be set where he thinks it is. And then there is Sarah, still alive, which is everything, which is the first victory of this entire second life, and the one that carries the most personal weight when Gray allows himself to feel any weight at all. Sarah is alive because he went into that forest with her instead of letting her go alone, and she is somewhere out there right now, probably still slightly unsettled by every interaction she has ever had with him. Still carrying that instinctive unease that she cannot categorize or explain, still the woman who wrote him a recommendation letter with a slightly shaking hand and told herself it was cold in the dojo. She does not know what she helped set in motion. She does not know what role she played in the architecture of what Gray is building toward. But she is alive, and in a future that already took her once. That matters more than Gray has words for. The picture at the end of this arc is not a victory lap. It is not a celebration. It is not a moment of comfortable arrival. It is a specific image that tells you everything you need to know about who Gray is and what kind of story this actually is. It is dawn. The academy grounds are quiet. The other students are still asleep, because normal students sleep at dawn after difficult weeks, because normal students do not have 15 years of apocalyptic memory driving them out of bed before the sun finishes rising. Gray is at the training grounds alone, and the demon's sword is in his hand, and the red lightning is cracking through the shadows around him. And there are pillars reduced to rubble around him that were standing when he got here, and his arm is not attached, and then it is, and then he goes again. Not because someone is watching, not because he has to perform capability for an audience, because the math does not care about his comfort level, and the liquidator does not care that he is tired, and the 15 years between right now and the end of the world will not stretch themselves to give him more preparation time than he has. So he trains. He bleeds whatever the demon's sword takes from him. He grows back what he loses. And he goes again. This is who Gray is, not a person who wins because winning comes naturally to him, not a prodigy coasting on innate talent, not someone for whom power showed up as a gift that required nothing in return. Gray is a person who decided what the world was worth and then put a number on what he was willing to pay for it, and has been paying that number every single day since Kronos sent him back. The black sword, the red lightning, the arm on the ground, and the arm grown back, and the training that does not stop, because stopping is a luxury, and luxuries are for timelines that do not end in fire. Our boy is not unbreakable. He breaks constantly, regularly, deliberately, and gets back up every time, because in his experience getting back up is the only variable in the entire equation that he fully controls. Somewhere in the deepest part of the academy, past the faculty offices, past the administrative structures, past the levels that most students and most professors never have reason to access, the people who are building toward the liquidator's summoning are having a conversation about Gray that did not exist 3 months ago and cannot be avoided now. They pulled up everything they have on him. They reviewed Bradley's assessments before the exposure. They tracked every incident report connected to him. They looked at the Divine Eye activation and the exam result, and the first-class ether demonstration, and the brainwash second-year fight, and the Bradley operation, and the camp assassination outcome, and every other data point they have been collecting. And the conversation they are having is not about whether Gray is a problem. That question is settled, obviously, completely. The conversation is about what kind of problem he is, and whether the answer to that question is something their current plans can absorb or something that requires a fundamental restructuring of their entire approach. Some of the people in that room are arguing for escalation. Some are arguing for patience. And one person, the quietest one, the one who has been in this game the longest and has the most accurate read on what they are actually looking at, that person is saying something that makes the rest of the room go very still. What they are saying is, this boy does not fight like someone who is trying to survive. He fights like someone who already knows how this ends. And he is not afraid of it. The room stays quiet for a long moment after that. Outside, at dawn, the red lightning crackles against the training ground stones. And Gray goes again. And that, right there, is where we leave our boy Gray, alone at dawn, demon's sword in hand, red lightning cracking through the dark, training harder than any person in that academy has any business training, with a criminal organization on his back, a conspiracy running through the walls around him, and a world-ending clock ticking somewhere in the distance that only he can hear. This story is just getting started, and if you want to see what happens when Gray finally stops holding back and shows the academy, and the blood drinkers, exactly what kind of monster they have been watching from the shadows, you already know what to do. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment from today's recap. Personally, I am still thinking about the arm, because that man said pain is just a training method and walked it back with zero hesitation. Absolute legend behavior. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one.